Good afternoon, everybody, and you're very welcome to Parliament buildings. As Michael says, there's no planned fire rehearsal today, so if the alarm goes off, it is an evacuation. If it's after 2, it's probably a disaster in the OFMDFM committee downstairs, so just follow my lead on the way out. Folks, this is a very, very important set of issues that you're looking at today. Some stats for you. You may be familiar with them, but I think they're worth the repeating nevertheless. Only a fifth of all the members of the Legislative Assembly this term are female, just 20%. And that means here we have the lowest representation of women in any legislature in these islands, with the exception of Dáil Éireann, just 1/5. And the introduction of gender quotas for the next Dáil elections will be expected to alter the situation, and therefore we're more likely to go down to the bottom of the league table than up. But of course, what we're talking about isn't just about political representation, it's a reflection of the level of gender equality in general in society in Northern Ireland. And again, some statistics for you. A third only of public appointments go to women, but females constitute only 19% of the chairs of all public bodies. Women make up 37% of managers, directors, and senior officials in employment, but again, only 24% of self-employed. In terms of county court judges, less than a fifth, only 18% are women. And there are no female senior judges at all in this country, not one. And while women make up half of the civil service, which is what you would expect, only 1/3 of civil servants of grade 5 or above are women, and there are no female permanent secretaries. And we have, for example, 12 departments in the executive. So the underrepresentation of women in positions of power is but one aspect concerning gender equality here in Northern Ireland. And the Committee of the Office of the First Minister and Deputy First Minister has remained engaged on gender equality. We've remained engaged. You may take a view on how well engaged we are. We received a briefing from the Department in February of last year on the review of the Gender Equality Strategy. And this review will form the basis for a new strategy, and the Committee will, of course, monitor developments in that area as well as we can. And gender equality remains one of the Committee's strategic priorities for the remainder of this 2014-15 session. And on that, let me just pause to say, the brief for the Committee is particularly broad because the remit of OFMDFM is particularly broad. And as a committee, what we decided going into this year was that rather than try and skim across everything, we might be better to actually pick some priority areas and drill down a little bit into them so that we get a better understanding. Because I feel that in previous years we have simply skimmed the surface. And that's not healthy because you don't get a detailed knowledge of anything. And it is perhaps better to drill into a few issues so that the department know that when you do focus on an issue, that you are going to ask detailed, knowledgeable and probing questions. Even though other officials may know that their area isn't a priority area this time, there's no guarantee that they won't be a priority area next time. So we're trying to improve the efficiency with which we scrutinise the department. We're also mindful that the review of the Assembly and Executive Review Committee on how to address the lack of women in political life is there, and I participated in a stakeholder event in October as part of that review. So, to the presentations today, 3 different but interrelated perspectives on women and on equality. In March last year, the Assembly passed a motion calling for the Minister of Finance and Personnel to both identify the reasons for the current gender imbalance in senior civil service positions and outline the progress to date against a plan to address this. So the first presentation today by Professor Joan Ballantine will examine in more detail the gender deficit at civil service executive level. And I'd also like to note Professor Kathryn Haynes, who contributed to this work but for personal reasons is not here today. Now, the PSNI recorded 27,638 incidents of domestic abuse in 2013-14, 12,720 crimes related to domestic abuse in that period. And in a 2013 follow-up report to its inspection on the handling of domestic abuse cases in 2010, Criminal Justice Inspection NI noted that this kind of crime is at a high level. It is increasing, and there has been limited progress in addressing the high dropout rate of such cases in the criminal justice system. So Professor Monica McWilliams will speak on addressing domestic violence and human rights protections for women. That will be today's second presentation. And finally, there is the conflict in Northern Ireland. It's often been viewed as a masculinist project with mostly men fighting and mostly men being killed and injured. And the traditional narratives of the conflict often exclude the experiences of women who took part, who became casualties, but also more often than not have been the main sustainers of families and of communities throughout the conflict and in its aftermath. Indeed, groups providing support to victims and survivors comprise often, primarily, of women. And largely absent from the negotiations to decide the future, there is a danger that women will also be left out of dealing with our past and its legacy. So in the last presentation of the day, Dr. Kathryn O'Rourke will speak on gender and dealing with the past in Northern Ireland. As I say, three different but interrelated and all very important topics. So, as I say, you are all most welcome, and we look forward with interest to what you as well have to say later in the day. I apologise I'll not be able to join you, but in 15 minutes the committee of the First and Deputy First Minister meets, and if you knew how I did my preparation, you'll understand I'll not be here for very much longer. Michael, thank you very much indeed.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of my colleagues, I'd like to welcome you to our presentation. And what we'd like to talk about today, we want to talk about a research project that has been funded by OFMDFM, but I need to point out, although it's funded by them, it's entirely independent of them. And our project has started in late 2012 and is due to complete in about 2 or 3 months' time. What we are looking at in our research project, we are looking at the whole idea of gender equality at the executive level or at the senior levels of organisations which comprise the Northern Ireland public sector. So in terms of providing, first of all, some context for the research, I'm sure you all are aware that the issue of gender equality at senior levels, both within private and public sector organisations, and indeed in public life, as has already been said in the opening remark, is receiving increasing attention. And I think there is recognition that there is some way to go. Progress has been made, but there is still quite some way to go. And within the Northern Ireland context, there is some limited data which is available with respect to gender equality at the executive or the most senior levels of that public sector. For example, there is some data with respect to the civil service. However, there is still a significant gap in data regarding gender equality at executive level right across the Northern Ireland public sector. And it's this issue that we're looking at right across the public sector. In terms of the objectives of the research, these were threefold. First of all, to establish a baseline. In other words, where are we in terms of the numbers, in terms of gender equality at the executive or the most senior level of organisations which comprise the Northern Ireland public sector. Secondly, we wanted, amongst other things, to investigate both barriers and enablers in terms of trying to achieve greater equality. I think it should come as no surprise that there are inequalities. And thirdly, we wanted to identify examples of best practice in terms of gender equality in our public sector. So in order to meet these research objectives, the project has 3 stages. Stage 1 involved the collection and statistical analysis of secondary data from 143 organisations, including the 12 government departments and the 26 councils. Stage 2 involved a survey of male and female executives and aspiring or senior managers in the same public sector organisations. And stage 3 involves a sample of interviews being carried out, approximately, I think we got up to 106, and then we decided we would stop because we were getting saturation. And it's interviews with both current and aspiring executives and senior managers. Now, for those of you who are interested, the findings from both stages 1 and 2 have been published on OFMDFM's website and are available there. And if anybody wants any more information on that, just tell us at the end. So essentially, stage 1 of the research project addresses objective 1, stage 2 addresses objective 2, and stage 3 addresses both objectives 1, 2 and 3. So before going on to look at the results of stage 1 and 2, I wanted to draw your attention to the makeup of the monitored Northern Ireland workforce for the public sector for 2012. And you can see in terms of the full-time employees, women make up about 2/3 of that, those employees. In terms of part-time employees, the figure is even more stark. They make up approximately 3/4 of the workforce. So what we can see here is that females play a huge part in the Northern Ireland public sector, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So moving on then to the findings from stage 1. Now I would like to note that we're only presenting some of the findings. As I said, if you want more information, there's a big report out there which gives you much more detail. So during stage 1, we collected data with respect to the most senior executives on the 143 organisations. And this gave us data for 2,308 executives. And from that, you can see here the overall breakdown. I think it probably comes as no surprise. You can see that males hold the majority of full-time executive positions. They also hold the majority of non-executive positions. And overall, we can see that the balance or the composition of the Northern Ireland public sector, remember this is right across the public sector, not just in the civil service, is 71% male and 29% female. And if you remember the slide that I showed a few moments ago with respect to the monitored workforce, you can see that the position completely changes. So women make up the vast majority of the workforce, yet when we look at senior positions, the position is completely reversed. Now, the data that we collected for the 2,308 individuals, we were able to decompose that, and we did lots of analysis of it, and I'm going to present just some of it. First of all, we were able to disaggregate the data into different organisational types. And you can see here on the slide, I'll not read it out, I hope you can see this at the back. You can see the 5 organisational types that we looked at. Now you can see that the least equality is evident in local government. Now those figures might be slightly skewed because within local government, we use councillors as a proxy for non-executives, and as you probably know, there are far more male councillors than there are females. So local government is the worst. That's closely followed by the Northern Ireland Civil Service and NDPBs. And we see a much better picture in terms of the overall composition between males and females in further and higher education, and even better in health and social care. And we would probably expect much better figures in health and social care, given that that sector has a predominant female workforce. We were also able to analyse the 143 organisations in terms of their sponsoring government departments, and here you can see the results. And we can see that there's a huge variety of gender compositions here, going from the, I don't like using the worst, but I'll say the least appropriate, I suppose, in terms of gender balance in departments like DARD, DRD, and much better in terms of OFM, DFM, and DHSS-PS. So a wide variety there right across the public sector. We were also, from the data that we collected for executives, now these are the full-time executives, of which there were 722, we were able to do an analysis of gender, and you can see by far and away the vast majority of the chief executive positions, which by the way are the people who predominantly hold the most power, or you could argue hold the most power in organisations, those are held by males. And we get the same picture as you would expect, given the overall balance of 79, 20, whatever it was. We get the same picture right across all of these roles, with the exception of human resources, which would tend to be a stereotypical female role. So overall then, the findings that I've presented from stage 1, and remember these are just a selection of them, they indicate quite a degree of inequality at the executive or the senior level of organisations which comprise our public sector. Now, moving on to the findings from stage 2, if you recall, we conducted a survey, and the survey was conducted, it was closed off in July 2013, and then it took us a little bit of time to analyse the results. We managed to obtain 3,186 responses. We were quite delighted with that response rate, and here we have some demographics. You can see roughly equal males and females responded to this. Sorry, I forgot to say that the survey was directed to both current and aspiring executives or senior managers. So there was an element of self-selection in terms of, you know, individuals saying I'm an aspiring executive. In terms of the age profile of the respondents, you can see that approximately 59% of them are aged 46 and over, so quite an aged population. In terms of the level of education, we were quite, we were delighted to see that the vast majority of the respondents, about 72%, are very well qualified at degree or above level. In terms of some further demographics, we asked individuals what sort of working pattern they were currently working to, and about a half of them are on flexi time. About a quarter are on a normal Monday to Friday 9 to 5 position. And what's interesting here is that there are very few individuals, we worked it out and it's not presented in this table, but about 16.3% of the respondents are availing of what we would call flexible work arrangements. So for example, reduced hours or a compressed work week or term time. And we'll come back to that later on, because flexible working is something that keeps coming up again and again in this survey. In terms of the length of service in the public sector, you can see from the data that about 79% of the respondents have been in or employed in the public sector for about 11 plus years. So there's a huge wealth of experience in terms of what these respondents are reporting. And finally, in terms of caring responsibilities, a significant number of the respondents have caring responsibilities. Now, before moving on to the 5 main aspects of the study, we also wanted to get some sort of a handle on the extent to which individuals within the public sector were actively opting out of career progression, either on a temporarily or on a permanent basis. And we were quite astounded that 1,058 people in the sample said that they had opted out of career progression to executive level for a number of reasons. And you can see that a number of these reasons are related to individual circumstances like caring responsibilities. But I wanted just to draw your attention to a few other issues that are maybe more worrying and from an organisational perspective. So a huge number, long hours culture seems to be an issue, unsupportive work environment, the lack of flexible work arrangements, and an inhospitable organisational culture. So there are a number of issues here which we believe warrant further attention. So moving on then, as I said earlier, there were 5 main aspects that we wanted to look at in the survey around gender equality. And the first of these was concerned with what barriers exist to career progression, both to respondents as individuals and also barriers with respect to organisational issues. And this slide presents the first of these. And let me just explain the graph first of all, because and apologies, there are a number of these coming. So what we did, we asked respondents to indicate their agreement or disagreement on a 5-point Likert scale, with 1 equal strongly disagree and 5 equal strongly agree, and 3 equal neither agree nor disagree. So what we're looking for, we're really looking for scores above 5 here to get some sense that there was agreement. And you can, what we also did, we also, in our report, we compared the results for males and females. And you'll see also on all of these slides that I have indicated on the slides where there are significant differences between male and female responses. So what this is telling us that with respect to, for example, the first one, the lack of management or leadership experience, there are a lot of both males and females are saying this seems to be an issue. With respect to females, so these are the two numbers here, females are saying that caring responsibilities and a lack of awareness of organisational politics are barriers for them, but males are saying they are not barriers. Moving on then to the organisational barriers, there's much more agreement. You can see that all the majority of the male and female responses are above above 3. So the sort of things that are identified here are things like limited advancement and acting up opportunities, but that actually might be related to the current environment and the lack of opportunity, you know, to move, etc. But we have also mentoring, which is quite important, and you'll see it comes up later on. A lack of mentoring, and that women see that as more of an issue than males. Lack of recognition for work-life balance is also seen as more of an issue for females and males. I'll not go through all of these, but just the main things that I want to draw your attention to. So moving on then to the second main issue that we wanted to look at in our survey, the enablers or facilitators of career progression. And again, we see there is agreement here between males and females. Interestingly, I just wanted to draw your attention to this one, consistently exceeding performance expectations. There seems to be an expectation that males and females need to do more over and above what's in their appraisal. Access to affordable childcare is more of an issue for females and males, and that's been identified in previous research. In terms of organisational strategies, again, much more consistency in terms of male and female views, but again, all of the differences are significant. So females are saying these are greater in terms of being an enabler. So the things I wanted just to draw your attention to are things like leadership training and development, and also flexible work arrangements. If you remember flexible work arrangements, both males and females said that they were not a barrier, and here the individuals are supporting this by saying that these are an enabler. You can see also that they recognise that formal mentoring is important. Now, interestingly, as an aside, we asked individuals to indicate the extent to which various career progression opportunities were offered to aspiring executives. I think this here table goes back to some of the issues we've looked at a moment ago, for example, training and mentoring. Let me just pick up on mentoring as the only one here. Oh, sorry. So with respect to informal mentoring and formal mentoring, the result is quite staggering. There's very few mentoring initiatives going on within these organisations. At least that's the perception of the respondents. More worryingly, there are huge numbers, look at this here, huge numbers of respondents who don't even know if these opportunities are available within their organisation. So there seems to be a lack of understanding. Moving on then to the third main aspect of our research, which was concerned with identifying what sort of policies and practices might increase gender equality at the executive level. The sorts of things probably come as no surprise. Providing constructive feedback if you didn't get the job, we've got training, etc. there, and also regular monitoring of executive level applicant data, and this indeed has been recognised as a weakness in the current monitoring of, in particular, public appointments. And moving on then to, we're nearly finished, moving on to the fourth aspect, we were interested in ascertaining beliefs about various gender equality or stereotyping statements. And what we can see again, there's a huge gap here between what males are saying and what females are saying. I just wanted to draw your attention to a few. For example, women managers have to perform much better than male managers. Now, whether you agree with that or not, there is a perception out there that that is what the state of play is. Compared to male managers, females must continually improve themselves. So there is a perception, whether or not you agree with it. And moving on then to the final aspect of the study, and we wished at this point to ascertain views around the gender culture of organisations in the public sector. Now what we see here is a complete reversal in the male and the female views. If I just take cronyism first of all up here, females are saying that cronyism is still rife within their organisation. Males are saying it isn't. With respect to these final three aspects here, we can see that females are disagreeing and males are agreeing. And they're agreeing, males are disagreeing, or females, sorry, are saying that their organisation does not have a balanced board in terms of gender, that their organisation has not allocated sufficient time or sufficient financial resources to promoting gender equality. So again, whether you like it or not, there are big differences here in the gender culture of organisations in the public sector. So in conclusion, the results suggest to us that there are gender imbalances which exist at executive level right across the public sector. There are large numbers of people opting out of career progression, which I think is rather concerning, particularly given that these people are very well educated. There's a low take-up of flexible work arrangements, despite the fact that every single public sector organisation has a whole raft of flexible working that apparently is open to all. And there are some very different perceptions around the barriers, facilitators, etc., in terms of male and female views. I think also worryingly, some aspects around career progression opportunities are not really fully understood by the respondents. And finally, there are still some negative attitudes around gender culture within our Northern Ireland public sector. Thank you.